Today's lesson will be Chapter 6, Process Costing. We're going to look at the weighted average method of calculating equivalent units and also the FIFO method of calculating equivalent units, as well as we're going to be looking at how to assign cost using the weighted average method. So you should be seeing exercise 6.18. I've created an Excel spreadsheet for the Cengage problem. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calculating equivalent units using the weighted average method. And the following data are for 4 independent process costing departments. Inputs are added continuously. So each one of these are departments here, and each one of these departments, they have given you this information about each department. What they want you to find is the equivalent units of production for each of the preceding departments using the weighted average method. And so what I like to do is I like to start with the whole units first. And so we're going to count the whole units for each one of the departments first before we find the equivalent units that they're actually asking for in the answers to this particular problem. With our units, we're going to start with our beginning inventory whole units. In this particular problem, they gave us the beginning inventory whole units for Department A. So I simply copied that 5,000 in here as the whole units for the beginning inventory. Then what you have to do is you have to determine the units started or the units that would have been received from a previous department. In this case, it'll be the units started. And instead of you having to determine it, like I originally said, they had given you the units started. So you just plug that in. Now you can determine the total units to account for by adding the beginning inventory units plus your started units or the units that you received from the previous department together. When you add these together, the total units to account for is 29,000. This 29,000 total units to account for can be substituted in for the total units to be assigned cost. These two figures are exactly the same. Then you fill in what was given. For the beginning inventory, we know that it was 5,000. That was given. I wrote it here, and you can write it down again here. This is given information that the inventory in process is 5,000. Now they gave us the units that we started. Notice it says unit started. That was given. You have to find the unit started and completed. There is a difference. And to do that, what we will do is we'll take the units transferred and subtract the beginning inventory units from it to get the unit started and completed. Well, in this problem, we don't have the units transferred yet, but we do know that total units to be assigned cost are going to be 29,000 that we plugged in here. And we do know the ending inventory whole units. They've given you the ending inventory whole units at 4,000. So if you know the bottom figure and you know the ending inventory units, you would subtract the ending inventory units from the total units to be assigned cost, and that will tell you what the units transferred are. So in other words, you had to find in this first department the units transferred of 25,000. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the 25,000 units transferred, subtract from it the beginning inventory, and that will leave you with the units started and completed. So in this way, you have your whole units. Now what they're asking you for is the equivalent units using the weighted average method. So when you're using the weighted average method to determine equivalent units, you only need your units transferred, plus your ending inventory units. So I've broken these down into both materials equivalent units and conversion equivalent units. The units transferred are 25,000. That's what we had to determine in the whole units. We determined that it was 25,000, so we can just simply plug that in. And since we have transferred these units out, they're finished with respect to both materials and conversion. So all 25,000 units have all the materials and all the conversion in them because we're transferring them out of the work in process to either the next department or finished goods. Now the ending inventory, we had whole units at 4,000. So all the materials have been added to the ending inventory units. So all 4,000 get materials. But you have to determine the equivalent units for conversion of the ending inventory units. And the way that we do that is we take the ending inventory whole units, which is 4,000, and we multiply it by the percent of ending inventory that was complete this period of time. And you'll notice that the percent complete of the ending inventory is 20%. So that's how I got 20% here. 4,000 times 20% is 800 units. 800 units are our equivalent units of ending inventory for conversion. And then you will add the units transferred plus the ending inventory units together to get your total equivalent units. Your equivalent units for materials is 29,000. Your equivalent units for conversion would be 25,800. And so that's how you would calculate the equivalent units. Each one of the next departments are done exactly the same way. It's just that they've changed up the information for you. So what I would suggest you do is plug in everything you do know. You know, beginning inventory is 4,000 whole units. So we plug that into both of these pieces of information here. We do know that we have units started at 20,000. So then we can determine the total units to account for by adding our beginning inventory units plus our units started or the units we received from a different department. These two added together are the total units to account for, which is 24,000. This 24,000 total units to account for is plugged in to the total units to be assigned cost. So we know that the total units to be assigned cost are 24,000, and we know that we have 4,000 in beginning inventory. And we also know from this, see these blanks here, that the ending inventory was 0. So if you plug in the ending inventory as 0, then you know that you can work backwards to find your units transferred for Department B, which has to be the same as the total units to account for because there was no ending inventory. Then you can work backwards to determine what you started and completed. 24,000 minus 4,000 leaves you with 20,000 units that are started and completed. So what I would recommend you do in each one of these situations is put down what you do know first, then work backwards to find the remaining. I would do the whole units first, and then I would complete my equivalent units for both materials and conversion. For the weighted average method, it's always the units transferred plus whatever you got in ending inventory. So in this case, there was no ending inventory at all we had to calculate. So the units transferred is the equivalent units for materials. The units transferred of a conversion is the equivalent units for conversion. And then you move on and do Department C. And in Department C, there's no beginning inventory, but we do know what units we've got started. So we plug in 0 for beginning inventory, 49,000 for those units that are started. We can add the two together to find the total units to account for, and then that would be plugged in to the total units to be assigned cost. We know the beginning inventory was 0, and we know that 9,000 units are ending inventory. So we really had to work backwards just to find the units transferred. So 49,000 less 9,000 is 40,000, which is your units transferred. And because we had no beginning inventory, that is also what we started and completed during this period of time. When you do your equivalent units for the weighted average method, we're going to pick up our units transferred for both materials and conversion. It's 40,000. And then our ending inventory units is 9,000. We've got all the ending inventory units for materials, but we don't have that for conversion. Only 30% are complete with respect to conversion. So 30% of 9,000 is 2,700. Combine the two of these together to get your equivalent units. For Department D, we were given beginning inventory units, just plug it in. We were also given units started, which was 35,000. Now you can find total units to account for by adding these two together. This amount would be plugged in here. This is your beginning inventory. We know the ending inventory is 10,000, so you can work backwards to find what you transferred. So 80,000 were what you had to account for. 10,000 was in ending inventory. The difference between those is 70,000, what you transferred. And 70,000 units you transferred minus your beginning inventory units will give you the started and completed units of 25,000. To determine your equivalent units for using the weighted average method, we start with our units transferred, and our units transferred we found was 70,000. So we're finished with materials and conversion with those units that we transferred. We're through with them. We transferred them out and we're sending them somewhere else. And then the ending inventory was 10,000. That was only 20% complete. So 10,000 times 20% is how we got 2,000. Then you combine both of these together to get the equivalent units. For 619, we're doing this exact same problem again. The only difference is this time we're using the FIFO method. So all the amounts are the same, but we're using the FIFO method. And if you'll remember, your whole units are the same as they are for the weighted average method. So I just copied these over. What will be different is how we calculate your equivalent units for conversion. Our beginning inventory is started in a prior period. So some of the costs are in the prior period. The beginning inventory would come from the ending inventory for last period. So all of the materials were added last period. So there would be 0 that need to be added for materials during this period for beginning inventory. But our beginning inventory was 30% complete last period of time. So what you're going to have to do is take the complement of 30%, which is 70%, and multiply it by 5,000 to get 3,500 units. So 3,500 units times 70% is the complement of what you finished last period is 3,500 units. Our unit started and completed comes straight off of the whole units here. You just bring it down. And then we'll calculate our units transferred by adding these two together. The beginning inventory plus what we started and completed together are the units transferred. And then we will determine our ending inventory based on 100% would be complete with respect to materials. So our ending inventory units were 4,000. 100% of 4,000 is 4,000, but we had finished our ending inventory with respect to conversion, only 20% during this period. So 20% of 4,000 is 800 units. And then we will combine these two together to get your equivalent units. So the equivalent units using the FIFO method are these units here for materials and conversion. And you're going to do basically the same thing through the rest of these. So it's kind of repetitive. So I really don't see any need to repeat anything at all. The only thing you really need to remember is that when you are working on your beginning inventory units for conversion, you got to take the complement of what was finished last period. And the remainder is done the same way. So I'm going to post this spreadsheet so you'll have a record of it, but I don't see really any need to go through the rest of these because they're just like doing this. So I'm going to move on to the next exercise. And the next exercise actually has us doing some cost. What we've been doing today is just mainly finding equivalent units. And this one, we're going to have to find both equivalent units and assign cost to the information. Or actually, they gave you the equivalent units. You didn't have to do that. But I went ahead and showed you how to do that again. This is exactly what we did in the last two exercises. In this problem, we are going to be using the weighted average method. So we'll make sure that you realize that we're using the weighted average method for this. So make sure you calculate the equivalent units using the weighted average method. And that would be the units transferred plus your ending inventory units. And so I've put all the calculations out that I could with this. And so I want to show you how they came up with this 33,000 and 29,000 for the equivalent units. So all of this is just really showing you how they came up with that. This is the important part for this particular problem that we had to do. And we're assigning cost to our weighted average units. So in the weighted average units, when we're calculating equivalent units, all we needed was units transferred and ending inventory units. The same is true when we're calculating our cost. But before we can calculate the cost, we have to find the cost per equivalent unit for both materials and conversion. And so this is how we complete the cost, or we find the cost per equivalent unit. We're going to start with our costs that are in beginning inventory for materials. And that is given in this problem. In this problem, they tell you that the beginning work in process direct materials is 90,000. So we're starting with 90,000 here for our materials. Notice I put a column for materials, and I've also got a column for conversion. So your conversion costs are coming next. They're 33,750 for beginning inventory. So that's where I'm getting this information. Now, what you would have to find is the total amount of the beginning inventory for that period of time. And it's simply the materials plus the conversion cost give you the total beginning inventory cost of 123,750. We're going to also need to know the costs that were incurred during this period of time. Our materials costs that we incurred during this period of time was given to us. The manufacturing cost that was incurred during April for materials is 75,000. So 75,000 I just plugged here. And the cost of the conversion was 220,000 for April. So 220,000 I just plugged in here. Then you can add the two together to get the total cost for April. And then when you add those to the beginning inventory, the total cost that you have to account for are $418,000. The total cost of your materials. Now, remember, we're doing the weighted average method. So you take into consideration the materials from the prior period and the materials in this period that we've added. We combine those together to get the total materials cost. And then we divide it by our equivalent units for conversion, which was 33,000, and that would give you $5. $5 is your materials equivalent units cost. Cost per equivalent unit for materials is $5. For conversion, the beginning inventory conversion plus the conversion that you incurred during this month gives you total conversion cost of $253,750. These two are added together to get that. We're going to divide those by the equivalent units for conversion, which was 29,000. And that will give you $8.75, which is your conversion cost for the weighted average. The two of these combined is the total cost per equivalent unit. Now, what they were really after was for you to assign cost to the units transferred. Remember, the units transferred were 25,000. So for materials, we have to take 25,000, multiply it by the materials cost per equivalent unit, and that will give you 125,000. For conversion, we take our units transferred, which were 25,000 units, times $8.75. That will give you 218,750. The materials plus the conversion added together are the total cost of the units transferred. The total cost of units transferred are these two added together, which is 343,750. Now, the ending inventory cost consists of your ending inventory units, which was 8,000, times $5. That gives you 40,000 for your materials ending inventory cost. Your ending inventory for conversion is 4,000 times 8.75, which is 35,000. The two of these added together is 75,000. That's your ending inventory cost. This is what you'll have left over in the work in process ledger account at the end of the period. So you got something you can check it by if you were in the real world. Just look at your work in process account to see if these two figures are on there. This would be what you transferred out, which would be on the credit side, the work in process, and this would be what you have left over as a balance in the work in process account. The two of these combined are the total cost to account for that you can see reconciles back up to this. So what I have in bold here is what Cengage was asking you to account for, but all this other stuff really backs up how you get to this information. It's important that you see the whole picture, I think, when you're learning how to do this. If you'll use these formulas over and over again, you'll finally learn them, and anything they throw at you, you can substitute in and work backwards to find the correct answers if you need to. So that's all I want to talk to you about today. I'm going to stop sharing this with you, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.